Okay, now the beautiful thing about being able to do this channel, uh, whether people watch it or not, is the fact that I'm allowed to talk about stuff that I want to talk about, and I don't have some 69-year-old guy barking in my ear, just talk Eagles. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. Never thought of that. What a novel concept. One of the things I want to talk about, though, is the fact that Shedeur Sanders has dropped out of not only day one of the draft, he dropped out of day two of the draft. And I think a lot is going to be made of the fact that Shedeur Sanders dropped out of the first, second, and the third round because this was a guy that you looked at and you went, yeah, he probably should be a top five pick at one point. A lot of mock drafts had this guy going top five. It didn't, it changed of what team, but a lot of people thought for sure this was going to be at minimum, top 10 pick. And you got teams passing on him. You got teams passing on him to take other quarterbacks. Well, the question then becomes why? I think what gets forgotten a lot of times in drafts where it's not necessarily thought of as a strong quarterback draft, and this was one of those situations. This wasn't thought of as a strong quarterback draft, is the fact that we overhype some players and then they drop. And I could give you plenty of examples. Plenty. Like Bryce Petty, and I think 2016, at one point was thought of by many as a first round pick. He ended up dropping to the Jets in the fourth round, and you never heard of Bryce Petty again. Matt Barkley was looked at as not only a first round pick, at one point he was the number one overall pick. Now he came back for his senior season at USC. He didn't have a great season, but still people thought he was going to be a first round pick. Drops to the Eagles in the fourth round. Malik Willis at one point was thought of as a first round pick. Malik Willis was thought of by some people as the number one overall pick. He dropped to the third round. I think he's on his second. I think he's still on the Packers. Like, this does happen. Sean Mannion, I think, was another guy who was like borderline first round pick, ends up going to the third round. It's not unheard of that some of these guys end up dropping. What's weird about this situation is the fact that you've got other quarterbacks being taken. And that's a little bizarre. Now, I don't know about you guys. I was watching the NFL Network. And Joel Klatt and Charles Davis brought up a really, really good point. That right now, if you were to take Shedeur Sanders, you're bringing him in to be your backup quarterback. This isn't a Cam Ward situation where he's probably going to start day one. You're bringing him in primarily to just hold a clipboard. But the fact that Shedeur Sanders is such a character, is such a name, is so well known, it kind of brings a circus to town. It reminds me a lot of what Cam Newton said when he was asked, why aren't you in the NFL anymore? Like, you're clearly good enough. And Cam said, well, look, I mean, if you've got a young quarterback and you bring me in, there's going to be pressure on the coaching staff to put me in because I'm a proven winner, because I went to a Super Bowl. They don't want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with the headache. So they just leave me out. They don't call me. In a way, I'm too good. He wasn't good enough necessarily to start and contend, but for the role of being a backup, he was too good. He brought too much pressure to the guy that they might be trying to develop, whoever that may be. Sounds a little ridiculous on the surface, but then when you really think about it, it does make sense. Yeah, okay. Let's take a guy like Cam Ward, okay? Cam Ward's there. He's throwing, looking all right. And then all of a sudden, Tennessee goes, you know what? We're going to sign Cam Newton. We're going to have the Cams. We're going to have the two Cams, and then Will Levis, you grab us coffee. Okay. Well, Cam Ward is going to start. But at the first sign of danger from Cam Ward, first cold stretch, you're going to have fans clamoring for Cam Newton because nobody wants to watch a bad product. I think the same thing's happening with Shedeur, where if you've got, let's say, and they picked a quarterback, they picked like a 29-year-old quarterback. Nah, the kid's 25. But if you had in New Orleans where Derek Carr might not start the year, okay, but let's just hypothetically say he does, and you've got Shedeur Sanders, and Derek Carr starts the year, but he doesn't look like Derek Carr. His arm is clearly getting back into shape, and he's struggling. Well, now Derek Carr is trying to regain form, and he's having to hear the calls for Shedeur Sanders. And there will absolutely be calls for Shedeur. No matter where he ends up going, round 4, 5, 6, 7, undrafted, there will be calls for Shedeur Sanders. by sect of the fan base, whoever that fan base is. So when you look at some teams, for them, the juice is not worth the squeeze, i.e. the headache. And I think that was another thing for the broadcast I was watching, once again, NFL Network. They didn't bring up the elephant in the room, which is this is a guy that rubbed people the wrong way. He didn't rub me the wrong way for the record. I mean, I like the confidence. I like the swag that he brought. I like the fact that he believes in himself and all of that. But to some people, maybe to like a good old boys club, they didn't like it. They didn't like the way he carried himself. They didn't like the fact that he was going to workouts with Giants cleats. They didn't like the fact that he's walking around Indianapolis with 4 different hats of teams that desperately need quarterbacks. They didn't like that. Now, you obviously know where he got that from. He got that from his dad, prime time. But they also might not have liked the fact that you've got the question of if he were to go to the Giants, was Deion going to let him go? Was he going to hold out? Was he going to force a trade? Like, there was so much made of Shedeur Sanders before the draft that you wonder how much of this is football related and how much of this is like off the field related. I'm not saying it's right. I don't think it is. And I don't think he'd be that much of a distraction. And I certainly don't think his father would be at practice demanding playing time and all that. But for an NFL franchise, they might be sitting there going like, I don't want to deal with Deion. I don't want to deal with the media circus. I just want to run a football team. So we'll see where he ends up going day 3. I mean, I'm sure he will end up going. At this point, I think we're all kind of surprised. But just remember, this isn't the first time a situation like this has happened. He's just a big name. He's just the biggest name to have it happen too. It's a bad quarterback draft class. But now you've got guys where they're going in round 3. And it's like, well, talent-wise, yeah, they're not Shedeur. Like, Dylan Gabriel's a prime example. Like, Charles Davis on NFL Network's like, I talked to one GM. He said I drafted him as a backup. Probably not drafting Shedeur Sanders as a backup. I thought LA would be a really good spot for him because Matthew Stafford isn't going to necessarily struggle enough where the calls for Shedeur Sanders are going to be loud enough to really, I feel like, make an impact. I felt like that was a good one. LA thought about trading Matthew Stafford anyway in the offseason, so like you could let him develop and learn. But then they ended up passing on him. Yeah, I don't know where he goes. But I think it's pretty clear that this is more off the field related than talent related. And it will be interesting to see how his career ends up going. Clearly, he's going to go in with a chip on his shoulder. And this has nothing to do with Shedeur Sanders, but does anybody else find it really annoying? The forced, contrived, pick is in, let's go to the podium, pick gets announced, we have the player graphic, highlight reel, and then I have to see the war room where you've got 25 suits standing up and clapping, staring at a screen. We don't need that. ESPN, NFL Network, I don't need to see the war rooms. I'm good. I'm really good. I don't, woo, yay, we're so happy. Oh, shocking. I don't need to see 25 guys clapping because they just picked some wide receiver in round 3 from TCU. I'm good on that.